Not a service. Yeah, see how many people are dedicated and will show up and all that. Stephanie, where'd you go? There you are. I need to get you a light. Yes. Did you just have a hard time?
No, I lost the rhythm on the last.
Because I had to turn these lights off until I get this light fixed.
Yes, I felt like a strobe light up there. I can see. So
Could you see okay?
I can see okay.
I don't need to get you a piano light.
I looked up and got lost in the music.
I don't need to get you a piano light.
No, sir.
Here I am trying to be a nice. It doesn't happen often. I was just checking. I mean, you could say no.
I will need a piano light, yes.
Some people, I tell you what, you try to be nice to them. All right, if you would open your Bibles to Esther chapter number 2. Esther chapter number 2. We are going to have fun this year. Can you have fun in the house of the Lord? The word that Jay was looking for all Sunday school morning was being relevant.
He also used the word progressive.
I love hip.
Thank you, brother.
You were showing your age there, man.
I was.
We need to be a hip church.
That's right. Yes, we do.
So that I'm here, I'm thinking like this. Let's be a hip church.
From hip hop to hip hop.
All right, the reason why I say we're going to have fun this year is the theme is coming from the book of Esther. The theme for our new year, and I'm not preaching that message this week, Lord willing, I'm preaching that message next week. Okay, the theme message is going to be next week. All right? Thank you, Art. I'm on it. The theme for this year, you're in Esther. I had you go to 2, didn't I? Let's just look at the theme phrase from Esther chapter 4 first, and then we'll get into the message. Most of you know my wife and I went up to Pine Top this last week. We spent a portion of that time working, scheduling out the year, doing different things, and we were going back and forth. I was stuck on another theme, and then my wife just popped this verse up, and I was like, you ever have the Lord hit you upside the head? Yeah, oh boy, that was one of those moments. And of course, we're closer because we're in Pine Top. He didn't even have to pull back that hard. It was just like a bam. But as soon as she said this phrase, I was like, that's the theme. And it's in Esther chapter 4 and verse number 14. We'll read the whole verse and then I'll give you the theme portion of the verse. It says, For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? The theme is going to be that portion of the verse, for such a time as this. And do we not need Christians to stand up in such a time as this? And like I said, I'm going to preach on that next week. I don't know, I'm going to start preaching right now. But don't we need Christians to stand up in such a time as this? Aren't we in some whacked out times? Aren't we in some whacked out times? I mean, black is white, white is black. Evil is good, good is evil. Aren't we in those days? And don't we need people to stand up and go to the king, just as Esther did? So, like I said, we're gonna look at that, but that's going to be our theme. And the reason why I say this is going to be a fun year, I love the book of Esther. And because the theme is coming from the book of Esther, that gives me permission to go into the book of Esther more. Right? Yep. I love Haman getting his comeuppance. I love Haman getting his comeuppance. Anyways, Esther chapter number 2. Let's look at, since we're in a new year, let's look at some new things. And we're going to actually get the new things from the book of Esther. And it will be in some other verses, kind of backing it up. We're going to get an idea from the book of Esther, and then we'll look at it in another portion of scriptures. The first one is in Esther chapter 2 and verse number 15. And I have to, in full transparency, I have to let you know that I fought with God on this message. Well, I'm in Esther 2, right? I wanted to go somewhere else. And the Lord gave me this message, and when I got to studying it and putting it together, I'm like, no, this is not. No, this is not. And so I studied another message. And then the Lord said, yes, it is. And so in Sunday school, while Jay is teaching the lesson, I'm putting this message together, finishing this message that the Lord gave me. So I want you to know this one, this is one of those times when I'm going to freely admit I fought with God on it. And what do I always say about fighting with God? You are going to lose. Or be limping like Jacob. And so this is the message that the Lord has for us. And so I'm behind it, by the way. I'm behind it now, by the way. You know, there's no fight. There was a surrender. And I'm on board. I'm with the Lord on this. And I hope it'll be a blessing to you as well. All right, Esther chapter 2 and verse number 15. Now here's what's happened, okay? Vashti has said no to the king. And the other part of the book of Esther that I really like is the reaction of all the chamberlains. All of the men chamberlains. Well, you let Vashti say no to you. Now our wives are going to tell us no, and there's not going to be any peace or rest or anything in the whole kingdom because you let Vashti do this, and we have to do something to her so that we can have peace in our house, because then our wives are not going to listen to us. I hear the whining all the time. And you know, the way that I feel about that first chapter is the wives weren't listening in the first place. They were just needing an excuse for the husband to say, the king said, and now you have to listen. And so the king fired Vashti from being the queen and is now in search for a new queen. Then we come up to verse 15, and it's Esther's turn to go before the king. Now when the turn of Esther, the daughter of Abihail, the uncle of Mordecai, who had taken her for his daughter, was come to go into the king, she required nothing but that Hegai, the king's chamberlain, the keeper of the women, appointed. And Esther obtained favor in the sight of all them that looked upon her. So Esther was taken to King Ahasuerus into his house royal in the 10th month, which is the month Tebeth, in the 7th year of his reign. And the king loved Esther above all the women, and she obtained grace and favor in his sight more than all the virgins, so that he set the royal crown upon her head and made her queen instead of Vashti. Do you think Esther had a new beginning? Do you think Esther, and you guys are going to probably catch where I'm going on this, became a new person? When the king chose Vashti, when the king chose Esther to be the queen, do you think that she became a different person, a new person? She definitely had a new job, didn't she? She definitely had a new wardrobe expense account, didn't she? Didn't she have a new wardrobe? I mean, if you just look at the coming up to her turn, what they got to do. I mean, ladies, you want to talk about a spa treatment. 6 months in the baths of oils and 6 months in the baths of, scents and perfumes. Come on. That's a whole year of bathing, spa. Yeah. There's probably jacuzzi tubs if there was such a thing back then. And all they did was lay around waiting for their turn to come up before the king. Lay around and make themselves beautiful. Pamper themselves. Now, that's to have their turn to become the queen. Now that Esther is queen, don't you think that she could have continued that on? She had an unlimited wardrobe expense account. Now, my wife would love to have that. She would love to have the shoe closet to go along with it. I'd love to give it to her. But the new thing here, there's a new beginning for Esther, is there not? There's a new beginning. She went from being just the niece of Mordecai. By the way, she's a Jew. We're going to get to that in a second. She's a Jew, and she's just the niece of Mordecai, and now she is the queen of the most powerful empire that there was in the world at that time. You guys are familiar with Leonidas and his 300? This is the Xerxes that went against Leonidas. This is the king. Ahasuerus was his other name. He is also the Xerxes of Leonidas and the 300. You know how big the Persian Empire was at the time? It was the empire of the world. Esther is now queen over that empire. Do you think she had a new beginning? We're in this new year. And, most of you, I believe most of you are saved, are you not? You had a new beginning, didn't you? Didn't you go from just being just a somebody, now you're the child of the king. But not only that, not only are we the child of the king, but we just saw this a couple of weeks ago, we're heirs and joint heirs with Christ, who is the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. You think that's a step up? Kind of like Esther with her step up. She moved from just the servant girl to now queen. I put in this, in the message right here, 2 Corinthians 5:17. 2 Corinthians 5:17, think about your salvation. It says, therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. That's a new creation. When I see the word creature, I don't think creation. I think creepy crawly thing. Right? Are you guys with me on that? When I think of creature, don't you think of like the creature from the Black Lagoon? We go into something like that. But this actually means creation. You are a new creation. That means you're not the same as you were before. Old things are passed away. That's in the verse. Old things are passed away. Behold, all things are become new. And I moved from just being a servant of the devil to now being an heir and joint heir with Christ. You think that's a step up? You know what my wardrobe looks like now in heaven? No skinny jeans. That's right. All white. That's what I read. It's all white robes. glorified body? I mean, that's got to be the biggest wardrobe change we're going to have, isn't it? Is that glorified body. You know, we were praying for Faith and praying for the prostate treatment that I'm going to have, the cancer or the radiation treatment that I'm going to have, and the health issues that every single one of us have. What a wardrobe change. You know, we get those glorified bodies, we're not going to have to worry about it. You know, even someone as young as Tiffany there struggling with her shoulder. Looking forward to not ever having to deal with the shoulder again. Talk about a wardrobe change. Just for that reason alone, I could be convinced to become a Christian. You know, David was asking the question of Jay in the men's Sunday school class. There's an intellectual part, but then there's also the spiritual part. The intellectual part is we give the truth of the Word of God. By the way, here's the truth. You're going to get a new body. You won't have to suffer anymore. Wouldn't you rather not suffer? And then I would take them to Luke chapter 16 and show them how the rich man suffered. Now, you can go there and suffer, or you can go to heaven and get a new body and not ever suffer again. Your choice. Right? There's an intellectual exercise that goes on in the giving of the gospel, but then the Spirit's got to come in and do the convincing. There's a new beginning here with Esther, and there's a new beginning with you and I. We got this new year, don't we? Couldn't we act like it? You know, Jim made a confession, by the way, I was with you on that. You know, don't we need to get back to our first love? Doesn't the book of Revelation speak about that on one of the 7 churches? Get back to your first love. You remember when you became the new creature? I've mentioned this before. You thought you could take on hell with a couple of water pistols? Right? You were telling your family, everybody that was unsaved, you were telling friends, you were telling everybody. They've lied to you your whole entire life. My wife would write letters to her family. She would just scathe the Catholic Church. They've lied to your whole entire life. Of course, we're in Spain. She's writing back. Yeah, that's where the Inquisition. She's writing back. You guys remember letters? You guys remember that? Yeah, mail. I got my hair cut yesterday, and I'm over next door. And April is the one that cuts my hair over there. And she's, how old would she say? You say she's 30s, not quite 40. I asked her a question. I'm going to show my age. How many of you guys remember when the turn on the brights on your car was the little button down by your feet? You guys remember that? When you wanted to click your light, put your brights on, you would go click. You guys remember that? I mentioned that yesterday because it was something else, and it reminded me of a joke. When the brights first came up here on the turn signal, people were throwing out their hips trying to get their foot up there to put their brights on. So I asked April that. She's like, no. I have never seen a car that had the brights down here. I was like, oh boy, I've shown my age. You guys remember writing letters? You're showing your age. You're showing your age. You guys are thinking when you write a letter, it's an email. I'm actually talking about paper, pen, fold it up, put it in an envelope. I have to address it. By the way, we had address books. It wasn't called a contact list. Was it, David? It was an address book. A Rolodex. Boy, you're aging yourself there. You're aging yourself there. All right, let's go to Esther 4. New beginnings, new creature. I was talking about, don't you think we ought to act like we did when we were the new creature? Let's get back to our first love. In this new year, you have 365 clean slate days, don't you? And you started out right this year so far. You're here. I saw Brother Mike, Amanda and Angela's dad, posted on Facebook before church. He says, none of you have been in church this year. And then he said, you can make that right by coming to church 10:30 this morning. That's when he had service. I was just smiling when I saw that. So at least we're starting out the year right. But let's get back to that new saved feeling. Let's get back to where we feel like we want to take on hell with the water pistols. You remember when you burned all those bridges? I think it's time to start burning some bridges again. That meant you were on fire. You were zealous. You were telling people about the Lord. Why? You loved them. And you loved God. You loved what Jesus did for you. And so you wanted to tell others so others would have the same feeling. By the way, it's not so that we get brownie points, is it? I don't get brownie points. Who gets the benefit from a person getting saved? The person that gets saved. They get all the benefit. All right, so we have this new beginning. Let's get back to the new beginning feeling. Because a lot of you are old. I mean, boy, that came out wrong, didn't it? Haven't we been saved for a long time? And haven't we gotten used to it? And that's what I'm talking about. We've gotten used to it. And getting saved is something we ought to never get used to. We ought to have that same zeal. Let's get back to that same zeal. So again, this new year, let's sometimes acting like a newborn babe is a good thing. Go out there and tell people. We weren't afraid at the time, were we? Let me tell you how the girl that witnessed to my wife. I don't know where it is in the Bible, but it's there. And it says this, we're all sinners. I don't know where it says it in the Bible, but it's there. There's only one remedy, Jesus Christ. That's all it took. My wife, or they made an appointment to come back at the end of the weekend, so it was like Friday, and then it was going to be Monday, and my wife couldn't wait for Monday to show up. From a girl who said, I don't know where it is in the Bible. It's there. Now, hopefully we know a little bit more. But it's okay to say, I don't know where it is, but it's there. You don't need to be a theologian to witness to somebody. Go with what you know. But let's be telling it like we used to. All right. Did I ask you to go to Esther 4? Yes. We're going to look at Esther 4 and verse number 14. I mentioned that Esther is a Jew. She hasn't told anybody that yet. And Haman has come up and he's threatened the Jews. As a matter of fact, there's a letter that's been written and signed by the king that all the Jews are going to be destroyed in a year in the kingdom. And Mordecai finds this out, and Mordecai comes to Esther and tells Esther, and they have a back and forth. And Esther's saying, if I go before the king and he doesn't ask me to come, he doesn't hold up the golden scepter, then I'm going to die. And Mordecai, gives us verse number 14. And says, for if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time. Now this time it's going to be the killing of all the Jews. Then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to the Jews from another place, but thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Who knows if the Lord didn't put you in as queen for this time? Now, the time that we're talking about is the destruction of all the Jews in the Persian Empire. And so Mordecai is telling Esther, who knows, this may be the reason you were put in as queen. I mentioned this, I think, last week or a couple weeks ago. God is not ever mentioned in the book of Esther. But he sure is there, isn't he? Who's doing all the back work here? Who's in the background? Running everything. We call that the sovereignty of God, don't we? God is sovereign, and God placed Esther there. And then Esther replies down in verse number 16. Go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go in unto the king, which is not according to the law, and if I perish, I perish. You know what else we need in this new year? Is we need some new courage, don't we? We need some new courage, don't we? And again, I'm going to go back to Jay's lesson. Jay was hitting on some points. You guys remember what would Jesus do? You guys remember Promise Keepers? What was the other one? The Prayer of Jabez. You guys remember that one? There's another one that's out right now, and I can't remember what it is, but it's along the line of Promise Keepers. Master's Men. Oh, a whole lot of programs on trying to get us closer to God, but through the teaching of man. Did any of you ever have the WWJD bracelets on your hands? What would Jesus do? Did you guys ever have that? Did you know what would Jesus do? And that's it. You guys have been around me too long. He certainly wouldn't do that, but how would we know what Jesus would do in a certain situation? All right, what Jay brought up in the lesson was we'd have to go to his word. That movement wouldn't go to his word, though. Boy, wasn't it feeling based. I feel like God wouldn't do that. Jesus would not do that because Jesus is love. And we have this long-haired, hippie, sissified image of who Jesus was because we never read the scriptures and we didn't know who Jesus is. What would Jesus do? Well, when you're thinking about what would Jesus do, remember he got that whip and he went into the temple and he turned over money-changing tables in anger, flipping tables. Boy, that movement wouldn't get along with that Jesus, would they? We need some courage in this time, don't we? we've got all these movements going on, anti-God movements, fake God movements. You know, the sports world, everybody pointing up into heaven. Yeah, you know, that's supposed to be, I'm giving God the praise for it. But then what's the rest of their actions? It's all about them, isn't it? They're going up before the camera. Have you seen that? Have you seen that pose? And then after they make a tackle or they make a play or something, they're walking way past everybody else, so the cameras will be right on them. That's not somebody who worships God. We need to have this idea that I'm going to be bold for Christ, and if I perish, I perish. Hebrews chapter 4 and verse number 16. Let us therefore come boldly unto the throne of grace. I'm sure God is sick and tired of people coming up to him. God, I know I've got problems, and I know they're big problems, and if you could just have it in your heart to help me out. Does that sound boldly to you? I forget which president it was, President of the United States. His son had free access to him all the time. Didn't matter if the Joint Chiefs were in the Oval Office. Didn't matter if he was on the phone with. His son had free access to him. God's running the universe. You know what you have? There's nothing more important in the universe to God than you. Come boldly to him. You say it's JFK, you think JFK's son was timid when he walked into the door? I've seen young boys. I raised 2 young boys. They don't do anything timidly. Boom! Doors are slamming, bamming, blam! Everybody knew who was coming. Boldly. Isn't that kind of different, or a different idea than we've had before, how we should come to God? You know, there's a difference between arrogance and humble. Or let me take it another step. There's a difference between arrogance and bold. God commands us to come to him boldly. He does not command us to come into him arrogantly. There is a difference. We need to get a little boldness in our prayer life, a little courage in our prayer life. And I think I've been talking about this for some time now. Don't you, when you pray, don't you think we ought to pray believing that God's going to do it? That's the only reason why we ought to pray. Why do you pray if you don't think God's going to do it? What's the motivation there? What's the reason for praying if you don't think God's going to do it? Sometimes I feel silly because I say things like this, but then when I go and I pray, I'm praying like, okay, God, I know you can, but will you? Is that bold? I just read yesterday or the day before, and I can't remember exactly what it said, but the idea was the only kind of prayers we ought to take to God are the big ones. And here's the reason why. Because, isn't he a big God? Isn't he a big God? Don't you think he already knows what needs you have? Even your little ones? But most of the time we're afraid to pray the big ones, aren't we? Aren't we? Say yes. All right, church, where are you sitting right now? Where are you sitting right now? All right, you guys are, it's my fault. Aren't you in a rented building? It's not our building. It's not God's building. I mean, it is God's building. He owns everything. We rent this building. Why don't we have our own building? Well, God, I know that, well, I think I know it's your desire that you would have us to have our own building. And if you want to, could you do that? Is that bold?
No.
But isn't that how we pray? I heard timing. Well, Lord, if it's not your time. Well, I'm sorry, when do you think God's time is? I only read in the scriptures today. Today's the day. We don't get prayers answered, and this is a whole other lesson. We don't get a lesson. We don't get our prayers answered because we don't believe. Ask believing. Second thing we need to have boldness on is our speaking of the gospel. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. Ephesians chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. And for me that utterance may be given unto me, that I may open my mouth boldly to make known the mystery of the gospel, for which I am an ambassador in bonds, that therein I may speak boldly as I ought to speak. A Christian. The only time we'll, excuse me, I'm using these words only and ever just to make a point. Most of the time when we say we're a Christian, it's because somebody else has already said they were a Christian. When I got hired in my 2 jobs, both at Lowe's and at O'Reilly Chevrolet, I went in to the interview and I told them, this is my second job. My first job is pastoring. I am a Christian. I will not work Sundays, and I will not work Sunday night or Wednesday nights. Or I'll be off, because there was a time when I was going in after. You guys remember that, when I'd go into church after Wednesday night service? That's bold, isn't it? Going in on a job interview and saying, you're my second job. What does that tell them right off the bat? They're not the priority. My priority is this position, what God has called me to. Isn't that bold? Isn't that how we ought to be? Not wait for somebody else to say they're a Christian, but to come right out and say from the beginning, I'm a Christian. Well, what makes you right and me wrong? I love that question. What makes me right and you wrong? Or what makes you right and me wrong? Yeah. When the person's speaking. Well, mine's written down in black and white. And there's no contradictions going on. You look at any other religious book and there's contradictions all over the place. You look at this one, there's not one. Not one. How can I speak boldly? I got the truth. Let's speak boldly. So a new courage. We need a new courage in this. And then, by the way, in Esther chapter 8. Esther chapter number 8. This is going to be the last point. Esther chapter number 8. Hey guys, mute my microphone for a sec. Esther chapter 8, verses 1 and 2. You know, in the new year, we can look for new blessings, can't we? Let's look at blessings that happen in the book of Esther. Esther chapter 8 and verse number 2. And on that day did King Ahasuerus give the house of Haman, the Jews' enemy, unto Esther the queen. What day was that? You know, that's the day that they were able to defend themselves, the Jews. And Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. I'm sorry, Esther. Did I say something else? Mordecai came before the king, for Esther had told what he was unto her. And the king took off his ring, which he had taken from Haman, and gave it to Mordecai. And Esther set Mordecai over the house of Haman. I love that. What was Haman trying to do the whole time in the book of Esther? The reason why he wanted all the Jews killed was because of Mordecai. He didn't like the way Mordecai was treating him. Mordecai never bowed down to Haman at the gate. By the way, if you look at Haman's name in the beginning of the book, you'll see that he's an Agagite. He's from the lineage of King Agag. Wasn't he supposed to be destroyed? Weren't all the Agagites supposed to be killed? And what happened to King Agag? Wasn't he hewn into pieces by Samuel, the prophet, the Jew? And do you think that the family of Agag passed that down? That the prophet of God, a Jew, hacked to pieces one of our family members. And here comes Haman. And Mordecai the Jew never did bow down to him. And the whole time Haman was trying to kill, yes, all the Jews, but his target was Mordecai. Right? And what happens at the end of the book? Who's living in Haman's house? Do you think it was a little shack? Do you think maybe Mordecai moved up in the world when he moved into Haman's house? He probably moved from the 2-bedroom, 1-bath rancher to the mini castle. 17 bedrooms, 5 baths. Also in Esther chapter 10, verses 2 and 3. Now, Esther chapter 10 only has like 6 verses in it. Verses 2 and 3, it says, "And all the acts of his power and of his might and the declaration of the greatness of Mordecai." The greatness of who? Whereunto the king advanced who? Him, which is Mordecai. What was Haman working for the whole time? That. You guys remember the portion in the book? Ahasuerus reads in the Chronicles how Mordecai had saved his life from the two chambermen or whatever their job was, and Ahasuerus wants to honor Mordecai, and he tells to his servant, "Who's in the court?" And there's Haman. He said, "Call Haman up into my private chambers." Now, Haman is thinking in his mind, Haman's getting called up into the king of the Persian Empire's private chambers. This is only good for Haman. Then the king says, how should the king honor whom the king wishes to honor? And Haman's only thinking, he wants to honor me. Who else in the kingdom but me should the king be honoring? And he says, put on the king's apparel, let him ride in the king's chariot and give him the ring and have somebody walking in front of it saying, this is how the king wants to honor whom the king wants to honor. That's a good idea, Haman. Go do that too. So Mordecai has the apparel placed upon him. Mordecai is riding it's either on the horse or in the chariot of the king. And Haman is in front of him. This is how the king wants to honor who the king wants to honor. Yeah, Haman's the one doing that. What was Haman working for? To be honored by the king. What did Mordecai get? Do you see the difference between coming boldly and coming arrogantly? I made that point just a minute ago, but we see it illustrated here, don't we? Haman was coming arrogantly. Who but me does the king wish to honor? Well, Mordecai. What did Mordecai do? Well, saved his life. He was in the background. Did Mordecai ever go up to the king and talk to the king? Not until after the fact. Not until after Esther introduced, by the way, here's my uncle Mordecai. But do you see how God blessed Mordecai? Do you see how God blessed Mordecai? For his boldness and his humility. James chapter 1. James chapter 1 and verse 17. We're almost done. We're almost done. We're going to get to the food in a second. We're almost done. James chapter 1 and verse number 17. Every good gift is from above. Every good gift. Oh, it throws in and every perfect gift. Oh, is from above. It cometh down from the Father of lights, with whom is no variableness, neither shadow of turning. Does God want to give you gifts? Does God want to bless you? Doesn't he write throughout his scriptures that he wants to bless you? And has he not shown that throughout the scriptures, how he blesses people? Let's think about the one in the Old Testament who was the richest guy on planet Earth ever. No, you guys aren't. It's not Job. Solomon. Solomon had to have a city to store his gold. Silver was so prevalent they stopped counting it. I mean, it's just, it's like cement. We don't count asphalt, do we? That's how gold was in Solomon's reign. And they just stopped counting silver. They almost got to the point of not counting the gold. But then that would be irresponsible. There's so much of it. Who gave that to him? Who gave that to him? You remember that one night Solomon had the dream? God came down to him, what can I do for you? Solomon said, you made me king over this people. I wish I knew how to rule them. He asked for wisdom. God said, because you asked for wisdom and not for riches or long life, I'm giving you both of those. Made him the richest man on the planet ever. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above. How can we tap into that? How can we tap into that? I'm going to only give you one verse. Okay, I'm only going to give one verse. But that shows servanthood and humility and our heart. Luke chapter 6. Luke chapter 6. Again, in the men's Sunday school class, Jay was talking about ownership. Do you own anything? You know, he asked a couple of guys, and Jim owns his house, and Art owns his truck. I own my truck. We're paying a mortgage on the house, and we're paying a mortgage on my wife's car. But I own my truck. You know, that's what we say. It's what we say, right? Is your bank account yours? Is your bank account yours? Is your house yours? Is your health yours? Is your body yours? Is anything that you have yours? I love telling that to my kids. Everything that you have is because I gave it to you. You never lock the door. Never lock your bedroom door. I don't care how old you are. It's my house. That's my door. That's my bedroom. Not your bedroom. It's my Wi-Fi. It's my internet. You'll give me your password. That's my email address. I'm letting you use it. It's mine. By the way, those clothes aren't yours either. I bought those. Even if you bought those, it was from money that I gave you. Everything you have is mine. Now, take all of that and act like God is the one doing the speaking. Everything that you have is because He gave it to you. Every blessing that you have in your life is because God gave it to you. Every thing that you have, clothes, cars, homes, everything else, any possession you have is because God gave it to you. But we have the idea like this is my stuff. Let me help you out here. In Luke chapter 6 and verse 38, and normally I preach on stewardship in the beginning of the year, and Lord willing, I'm going to do that. But in Luke chapter 6 and verse 38, what's that first word? Give. All right, what's the implied, or who's the implied subject here? I know we're doing grammar on New Year's Day, aren't we? Alan, you're a math teacher, aren't you? Do you know anything about grammar? Okay, good. Thank God, because I loved math. Math and sciences was my thing. Grammar was not. All right, who's a grammarian in here? What's the implied subject here? The understood you. You give. Isn't that a command? Yes. Doesn't that sound like a command? Yes. It doesn't say if you want to give. It just says you give. But then what happens after that? What happens after that? Look at the rest of the verse. And it shall be given unto you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running together, shall men give into your bosom. For with the same measure that you meet withal, it shall be measured to you again. Let me rephrase that verse. Every good gift and every perfect gift give. And every perfect gift, every good gift, everything that you have is from Him. And wouldn't you like to be Solomon? Wouldn't you mind being Mordecai? I mean, we don't have to go Solomon route, but Mordecai wouldn't be too bad either, would it? No. Move from your 1,100 square foot house or 1,400 square foot house to a mini mansion? Now we'd have to have cleaning service come in. I've been married to my wife for a long time. There would have to be a cleaning service on a mini mansion. But the comfort, blessings, Wouldn't we like some new blessings in this year? I think if we act like we were new creatures, and if we act with a little more courage and boldness, don't you think number 3 would fall right into place? Don't you think? Now, let me just kind of put out a caveat. It may not be a huge bank account. It may just be that the stuff that you have now lasts longer.
Yeah.
My truck is a 2005 Ford F-150. It's got 289,000 miles on it. And except for, and I talked to Randy about this already, except for the little brake, the squealer that's loose and it's laying up against, because my brakes are fine. We looked at the brakes, the squealer has come loose and is laying against my drum and grinding. Except for that, it's a good running truck. How long has the Lord let that thing last? Well, past its lifetime. Mostly, and some of you guys say this because it's a Ford. Well, it's well past its lifetime because it's a Ford. If it had been a Chevy or something else, yeah. First on race day. Sometimes it's not that he gives you a big bank account. Sometimes he just makes your stuff last longer. Your clothes last longer. Your shoes last longer. Your food lasts longer. Like I said, sometimes it's not a monetary thing that you see in your bank account. Sometimes it comes in other way. You're not spending money on something that you normally would be spending money on. So again, if we act like new creatures and we have that courage, I think number 3 will come into place. God will bless us and take care of us. So in this new year, we got a clean slate. We got a clean slate. Let's take the opportunity and use it wisely. Tell people about Christ like you did when you first got saved. Boldly. Come boldly before God and speak boldly to the people. And allow God to bless you. All right, let's stand to our feet with our heads bowed and our eyes closed. Stephanie will come up and play a hymn of invitation. Christians, you know what the invitation is, or you ought to. Lord, help me be like I was when I first got saved, and I was telling everybody, didn't care who it was or what I was saying. I didn't even know what I was saying, but God help me be like that. Now that I have a little more intelligence, help me to be a little more intelligent, but have the same attitude, the same spirit. And then God, let me be courageous. Let me have courage. Let me speak boldly. In times like this, let me be bold. And Father, I pray that you would just bless us. Open up the windows of heaven like you tell us in Malachi. Open up the windows of heaven. Pour out a blessing like we have not ever seen before. Father, this is a new year. And humanly speaking, it's a rough year. It's going to be hard for Christians. Help me to be bold. Who knows? God puts you in this world at this time for such a time as this. Help us to be bold. If you're here this morning, you're unsaved. What a day. I mean, this is the first day of the year. Get saved today. Live the new life. I mean, there are so many benefits to salvation. There's no benefits to staying lost. The only thing you have to look forward to is going to hell. That was harsh, wasn't it? But that's all you have to look forward to. Your master has lied to you. The devil has lied to you. Don't let him lie to you anymore. Come to Jesus. He's only the truth. He is truth. And let him bless you. All right, I appreciate your attention this morning. Let's go ahead and be dismissed in a word of prayer. And then, guys, if I can get you to help me take apart this half of the room, stack the chairs up in stacks of 5. And we'll roll them over here. Then we'll set up some tables and chairs, and then we can get to the eating. Everybody's invited to stay and eat with us, so please do so. The rest of you, don't come back tonight at 6. We won't have service, not tonight, but come back on Wednesday, and we'll take up our regular schedule starting on Wednesday night. So we look forward to that. The second service, the afternoon service that we're going to have after we eat, is just going to be praying for this new year. I'm not going to preach. I'm not going to ask questions or answer questions or anything like that. All we're going to do is pray. So stick around for that, and we can pray in this new year, and pray that God will do something wondrous in this place, and then because of doing that, something wondrous happening in the world. And so that's what we're going to be praying for in our second service. All right, let's go ahead and be dismissed in a word of prayer. Then we'll fellowship one with another, and then guys, if you'll help me out with the chairs, that'd be great. Jay?